Okay, welcome everyone. We are so happy that you are here with us today. We are going to be, this is I think our first dinner in a movie, Maktub, which is an Israeli film, 2011, available on Netflix for anybody who might be watching this on their own time, not with us live here, and you want to go back and watch the movie. I don't know how many, I think most people here have watched the movie in one way, shape, or form. If you haven't, that's okay as well. It is one of my favorite movies of all time because it kind of brings everything Israeli together: comedy, ridiculousness, heartwarming, challenging, all of the above. So one of the things that we're going to have the opportunity to do, in addition to getting your thoughts and your ideas and some things that might have stuck out to you, is to kind of discuss some of the issues that are really at the heart of the movie. And we'll do that throughout the year with our Dinner in a Movie series. And we're looking forward to it. So I want to start with a not so small question. And I'm going to ask you guys, you can simply unmute and answer as you would like. Part of this movie clearly is about the two guys, Steve and Chuma, who are trying to figure out life after a terrorist attack. They, as you know, if you watch the movie or if you read the little blurb, are kind of very low-level mafia type criminals. And it is true, there are Jewish mafia people, there's Israeli mafia people, there's Israeli criminals, all of the above. I don't want to go into the whole current political situation in Israel. You can decide who's been indicted and who's not been indicted. But wherever people may show up in the world of Israeli crime, let's call it, you have these two guys who are not the world's best people, I think we could argue. And they, as you know, are going to collect some money in a way that only low-level mafia people can do. And there is a bomb that explodes. In Hebrew, that word is pigua with a gimel. And if you ever hear that word when you're in Israel, you know to just get away from the situation. Okay, it's one of the things that everybody knows when you hear it. And unfortunately, they are they're victims of a pigua, and they are the only ones who survive. And now they have all this money. And as you know from the movie, there was some discussion about what they should do with the money or where they should go or how they should use it. And ultimately, they make a decision to change their ways, or at least a suggestion is made to change their ways because they survived. There must be something, God or a higher power or some reason, that they survived. And so I'm going to ask you one not so small question. Okay? After watching this movie, how would you judge these guys? Would you say they are good people, not good people, somewhere in between, all of the above, none of the above? Anyone who would like to share? How do we judge somebody? Toby, go ahead.
I think there are people who are trying to reform. They're trying to become better in life. And I see that as a positive.
Okay. And should, in your opinion, if someone is, we can argue whether they are honestly trying to do this or not, I would say they are. But let's just use as a generic statement. If someone is honestly trying to reform, should we, the rest of us, whoever we are in the community, accept their attempt? Or should we look at it skeptically? What do you think? Toby, since you raised that, I'll go to you first.
Okay, well, I think we should accept the fact that they are trying to be better people.
Okay.
And they're trying to do good for the world.
Okay, fair enough. Who else would like to, either on a generic, in a general way, how do we judge somebody? Or these guys in particular? Helen, I see you're ready to go.
I was just going to say that I think they were trying to do the right thing, but their methods were a little questionable.
Fair enough. Their methods were questionable, trying to do the right thing. So Helen raises a point, which is something we could talk about throughout the evening or throughout our lives. Is it the effort that someone puts in? Is it their intentions of what they're trying to do, no matter how they get to those ways, even if we wouldn't do it the same way? So it's something to think about, right? Like, what's the most important part or critical part about trying to change your ways. So would anyone else like to share, either again with Stephen Chuma or with just in general, how do we choose to judge someone or see someone who might have done things one way in the past and now are trying to do things another way?
So no one's all good and no one's all bad, right? Everybody's a mix of everything. There's a continuum. I think clearly at the beginning they were on one end, perhaps, of the continuum, but maybe that's just, you don't know how they got there, right? You don't know what the circumstances were that put them in the position where they were in the beginning. But I do think that, when people make an true honest effort to reform, it comes from the heart, you support it. And again, it's hard to sometimes it's hard because I do think that there are things in movies that people can get away with that you think are fine, and then in real life you hear that you could hear the same story in real life and be like, oh, no way, right? Because we seem to get away with things in movies, but I think they were both a little bit of everything, and I think they really did want to change. It maybe took one of them a little bit longer to kind of get there than the other, but
okay.
I
will share with you that one of the great biblical characters that kind of falls into this category of how do you look at somebody is King David, right? He's to me the classic example. So defeated Goliath, that's good. Fought for the Jewish people, became a great king, clearly involved in the building up of the Jewish people, in many different ways of a Jewish culture and a Jewish way of life, and decided to engage in an affair with a woman who he just thought was looking pretty good over there as he was looking out at from his palace, and then sent through several means, including sending a letter to the commander of Uriah, who was this woman Bathsheba's husband, caused Uriah to die, right? And by the way, I always like to say, if it's on some TV show, it's already happened in the Bible. In the meantime, got her pregnant and was trying to make it look like her husband really did it, but it was really him. And then, of course, that prophet Nathan comes at the end and whispers in his ear, like in a great movie, I know. And this kid is going to haunt you for the rest of your life. And the kid does. What a great book that the Bible is. So, okay. My second question related to this movie is, can people really change? Is it possible? And before I share some things that come out of Jewish tradition, I would love to get your thoughts. Can somebody really change? These guys went for it on a certain level. But can you? Can a person really change? Or do we say, you can't teach an old dog new tricks, so to speak? Anyone want to share their thoughts on, can people change?
I'm going to turn it around with a question to you.
Sure.
In America now, I think it's a pretty hot issue, in terms of the criminal justice system.
Uh-huh.
Is there a possibility of redemption for all but the absolute most evil criminals, or do you just lock them up and throw away the key? And I think there's a real dichotomy between those 2 points of view. I was wondering, in Israel, is there a similar philosophical debate going that, some are saying we're too soft, or they're too soft on crime, and others are saying, no, you have to give people a chance, even in prison, to redeem themselves and perhaps get out of prison at some point?
The answer is, generally speaking, B. People have the ability, to redeem themselves. In Hebrew, we would say, we hear it all the time during the high holidays, teshuva, right? To turn around, to repent, to come back. It is particularly of note, and I'm not here to get into the politics, but now I will just say one thing about it, that Benjamin Netanyahu was just elected prime minister of Israel, and he literally was indicted by the Israeli court system. So can you find your way back? apparently, yes. You can find your way not just back to, let's say, living a life that is productive and, working at the corner store and, paying your rent, but you can literally become prime minister, right, in Israel. I mean, he was 100% indicted. It's not even a question. He didn't end up, serving too much time or anything like, he had some house type of stuff. He never went to jail. But so it's a question of like, there is a belief in it. And then I think a little of what, I forget who said it, is like, to what degree do any of us, I think Sherry said it, to what degree do any of us really accept it? Right? Like, I will give a perfect example that I think is a fair example. Okay. Many of us here on Sunday, like many Sundays, will watch the Eagles play when they're on TV. Okay. We know that several quarterbacks ago, Michael Vick was quarterback of the Eagles, right? There will be those who say he committed several crimes, but he committed crimes dealing with animal cruelty. He served his punishment. Now he should be able to come back to be a player on the Eagles or any other team for that matter. There would be others who would say, yeah, but, right, what he did was so horrible, or what someone did was so horrible. So I think what Toby has said and Sherry has said and others have said that make it so challenging is there's kind of like the black and white of a law or the law, and then there's what happens when it really happens, right? And how do we handle that? And it's hard, right? I'm gonna pick something again that did not happen, or the first part happened, the second part didn't. If Bernie Madoff, after doing what he did, was able to get out of prison within whatever the justice system decided, let's even say it was a short term, 1 year, what would people think? Some would say he served his time, and other people would say he should be there for the rest of his life, or whatever period of time. So I think the answer to your question is, Howard, in theory, the answer is people do believe in Israel in repentance. And then the question is, what happens when it really happens? So, okay. Mark, please.
I feel like there's a difference between repentance and changing. I would argue that at a certain age, people don't change. Generally, they just don't. But I've also, I think we want them to. And so, so maybe there's a small percentage that do, and we always want that, or I would always want that. But I just find it hard. And I'm maybe a little more pessimistic. I don't think people generally change who they are. Not to say they can't change their ways necessarily, but I think they don't change who they are. But
Got it. Okay. By the way, one of the things, we're not only trained to do this in rabbinic school, but just in my own personal experience, when you are meeting people who are a couple who is getting ready to get married, one of the things you say, because it's not only true, but you want to make sure they understand, is that you can't change the person you're getting married to. So without going down a road of, let's talk about our spouses, for those of us who are in that boat, I just want you to think about the concept of the person you married. Could you change them? Could they change you? Sherry is raising her hand bravely.
I don't think people can change, and I don't even think the two main characters changed. I think they grow. I think people, it's always in you, right? Everyone can, there's a whole lot of stuff within us. And I think people just grow over time. I don't think what is inside you is necessarily changing. I think different parts of you can be strengthened or weakened.
Okay. So, for example, the example I always give is that when I met Jerry, we were living in Israel, we were in school, and my room in the apartment that I was living in was built for a 4-year-old girl. So imagine like a very small room, a very small bed, not a lot of area to move around. And when Jerry first met me, she walked in, or not the first day, but early in our relationship, walked into my apartment, like had the courage to look into my bedroom door and literally said to me, "What is that?" And I said, "Jerry, it's my pile of stuff." And she said, "What do you mean your pile of stuff?" I said, "If I have it, it's in there somewhere. It could be a book. It could be my clothes. It could be, my wallet, whatever it would be. It's in there. It's got to be right there." And I think, although I've gotten better, to use your term, Sherry, I've changed, I've grown, you still might find some piles of Eric's stuff around the house in which I know where things are. But Jerry, still maybe 20 something years later might be working on changing that and understanding that that's not always the way it goes. So I think that's a fair example. Okay. So let me ask this question, unless someone else wants to add, please, if you would like to add. Okay. If we're talking about growing and changing like these guys did in the movie, however we want to phrase it, and this I'm going to ask, I really love that we're part of a wonderful community that's willing to share. Their moment was when they survived this attack. Okay. And in their own way, they decided to have a new perspective on things. Is anyone here willing to share if there was a moment in your life, or if you can think about a moment in your life when you said, I need to, whether we want to say change or as Sherry said, grow, that you can look at and say, this was the moment where I said, things have to be different. Or are you all just amazingly perfect people who have never needed to change in your own way ever? I would ask us to think about that a little bit, because I think one of the things that is important in life is to kind of see what are those moments, what are those times, what are those, who are those people that have really had the greatest impact on us, really truly caused us to grow or to look at things in a different way, right? Or to understand life in a different way. Okay, and for some people, Sarah, go ahead. I see you have your hand raised.
So this isn't like a moment in the movie, but I think when you become a parent, you look at what you want to tweak about yourself, change about yourself, what you find acceptable, unacceptable. It doesn't have to be anything life changing, but I think you start to take inventory of what you want to keep and what you want to continue to pass on.
Okay, thank you so much. So for a lot of us, those moments when we, whether it's once or more than once that we became parents or became parents again, whatever it may have been in our lives, right? That, really changed the way in which we viewed things. Okay. And now I'm going to add, Barbara, please.
Yeah, I think, I don't know that we can say we change who we are. We just change the way we may do things. And I think in that regard, I think we are all capable of making a change. Growing up, there were things that I saw in my mom, may she rest in peace. She was very much of a homebody. And I knew that that's not what I wanted when I was going to get married and live my life. So I think, I don't think you can change the person. You can change the way that things may be done by that person. So I think that when somebody passes away, I talked about that on Yom Kippur, that when someone passes away, that everyone should look at one another. And if you're angry, find a way deep within to heal that. So I don't think that I changed the people as much as opened up their eyes to make them do something different.
Okay, inspired them, one might say, to do something different. Fair enough. I will not ask Lenny if that's true. I'll just say, sounds good to me.
He said at times.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I am going to ask a question and then share a text with you guys. But again, I would love to get your thoughts first. The idea of growing, the idea of changing, the idea of opening someone's eyes or opening your own eyes, whatever it may be. Why is that important? Like, why should we grow? Why should we change? Why should we have our eyes opened? Or should we? I mean, is it okay if we never grow? Is it okay if we never change? Would anyone like to share their thoughts on that? And I'll share a text with you from Jewish tradition. Ellie, please.
I think you have so much of a richer life if you open up yourself to new experiences. Like Barbara said, you know, if she just was going to be a homemaker, her mom's world was probably just in her house. And that was my mom too. And I knew that I always wanted to work too, just to have broader experiences and come in contact with different people. So I think it would have just been very difficult for me if I hadn't done that.
Okay, so maybe in some ways to be like those we grew up with, and other ways to be different than those, you know, to kind of do it differently than others that we've grown up with. Not to say that what they did was wrong or bad, but just to do it in a different way. Why else? Why else? I mean, one of the examples I always give to people, and obviously I live where I live, and Matt Shear and me where I grew up and those kind of things is, you know, for me personally, one of the most pivotal experiences I had in my life was being a student rabbi in Mississippi for a couple of years. I mean, we went every other weekend, every third weekend. And when I tell people that in a second, I would move to Mississippi, like tomorrow, I would move there, you get the look of what Barbara Roth just did there. Like, why would you want to go there? And I always tell people, you have to go there to understand why you'd want to go there. The people are amazing, right? In my experience. So I think that concept of having experiences that are different, perhaps I'll just use my parents, for example. My parents, who now travel quite a bit, grew up in Philadelphia, right, in Overbrook Park and in Upper Darby. They went to Temple University. You know, my dad's always worked in Philadelphia. My mom's always worked in either at Cheer Me or in other places in Philadelphia. And that's, you know, that could have been their life. Just Philadelphia and its environs their whole life. So for them, it was important for my brother and I to get out and see the world a little bit. And I think for us, you know, for Jerry and I, for Jay to do the same, and for my brother, for his two kids. And so I think there is something about kind of looking at things differently than others look at it that allows you to grow. By the way, it's also in a different way. And I think this is something that's very important. And again, without getting political or into whatever divisions of the world there are, it's why I think it is always interesting, and there are Pew studies and other studies that talk about where people get their news from, right? And what I'm going to say will not surprise you, but I just want to say it. You, me, every other person, 90 whatever % of us get our news from a source that we already agree with before we read it or see it or look at it or watch it, whatever, on a video, right? And they tell you should, you know, just to pick 3 channels that kind of people feel go across the spectrum, but at the top of every hour, somewhere during an hour, you should watch, you know, MSNBC, CNN, and Fox, and, you know, see them all, right? And see what people are talking about. Barbara.
Yeah, I'd like to just,
Sure.
for most of the people on this site, they'll understand. I got a text message from someone last night who volunteered. And when you talk about change and viewing things,
Sure.
this person said that volunteering for Code Blue last night was so humbling and rewarding. And they're looking forward to doing it again, because it certainly put a whole different perspective of life into what she has been thinking. So, you know, that's.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm going to share one thing with you here. Hopefully you can all, in a minute, see my screen here. And this is, a rabbi, his rabbinic name is the Malbim, talking about the story of Noah. And he says, from the verse, God named him Noach, that's the
I have
Hebrew for
sweet and sour
Noah.
meatballs.
He
And then I
said,
have regular meatballs.
he said that the word Noach means this one will console us. For those who don't know, the word Noach can mean to rest or to console or to comfort or any of those kind of words in Hebrew. Okay. You may know that in Hebrew, it is during Shabbat, there is this idea of doing something called Shabbat Minucha, which comes from the word Noach also. So Shabbat rest or Shabbat relaxation. But here, the Malbim, who is, as I said, rabbi in the Middle Ages, said that he explains his commentary that the word Noach, that's the Nun, the Chaf, and the Mem, is actually refers to a change of attitude. This is consistent with the idea of consoling mourners, as the mourner's attitude changes from grief to happiness. This is also consistent with the idea of regret. As it says here, this one will make us regret. So he translates the idea of Noach to mean both a change in attitude and the idea of regretting what we've done in the past. And that if somebody truly wants to change, I'm just going to skip ahead a little bit, that person will refrain from useless activities that have no positive effect for the benefit of humankind, and thereby will also find rest from doing that which is evil on the land and that which is cursed as a result of the evil is a strong word here, but doing the things we shouldn't be doing. Okay. So on a certain level, this is what we've talked about a little bit. This idea that change, or why we should change, is so that we as individuals go from kind of, it becomes a change of attitude for us. We can change people's attitudes, but we change our own attitude. We honestly look at our lives and say we regret what we've been doing. Okay. That doesn't mean you have to have done something horrible. For example, to another person. For example, I'm not really going to ask this question. I'm just going to speak personally. If I am being honest, I think it would be a great idea if I changed my eating habits. Okay. They're not always the best. Okay. And if I looked back, I could say I regret the fact that because of that, there's some medicines I have to take now, or, some things that I have to do or work out or whatever it happens to be. Okay. And so that's important for, me to do personally, to change my attitude about things for myself. So on the one hand, it is good to change because it will change each of us to stop individually from stopping to do things that are not so great in the world. Okay. But there is also another very important text that I want us to think about for a minute here. And I'm just going to share this with you as well. Okay. This comes from the Talmud, which is right in the middle here, Yoma, which talks about all the important days of the year. And it's talking about our repentance, our teshuvah, which means literally to turn around, to change, to do all the things we talked about. That according to Rabbi Meir, teshuvah, that change, that growth, that opening one's eyes is so great that if one person does it, if one person sincerely, honestly resolves to change, the entire world is forgiven. That's not so bad, right? By the way, it also comes from the idea that one human being was created at the beginning of time, and whatever one human being does or whatever happens to one human being, it's as though it happens to the whole world. So I just want us to understand, and this movie is a good jumping off point, that for those who change or those who grow, as each of us does that, we are doing things for ourselves, of course, to better ourselves, but we're also literally making the world better. And so one can make the argument from this movie in their own kind of humorous way, whether it's dressing up like a woman to go get a note out of the kotel, or hanging a guy out of a window, to kind of really make sure he wrote that note, even though, of course, they know he did, right? The idea is that if we just go and make the world a better place by making ourselves better, look at what we can do, right? Look at what can happen, right? Not only can we throw the bar mitzvah party some boy has always wanted, but we can literally make the world a better place. and make ourselves better people by doing things that are good, truly good and right. And that also is at the core of this movie, even with all of the humor that's involved and everything else along the way. I want to ask, unless does anyone want to comment on any of that? And then I'm going to ask another question. If you want to, great. If not, also great. Excellent. So I want to share one part of the movie that is particularly, I think, challenging for all of us. We'll see you soon, Mark. Thank you so much. And please come to Shabbat tomorrow. It's going to be great. Having practiced with everyone for the last 3 months, it's going to be fantastic. So we'll see everybody there. We will have earplugs available, just so everybody knows. They're going to be available for sure. But I will say this. In the movie, one of the characters, as you know, even when he has kind of begun to grow and change and open his eyes, he is still wrestling with a lot of his past, especially a child that he has. Okay. I'm going to ask you a question again these are not small questions, if that's the right way to put it. Do you think we as human beings, I'm not going to ask anybody personally, do you think we as human beings, even in trying to make the world a better place, can sometimes justify our own shortcomings? Can we not quite look at ourselves in the same way? And what do we make of that? Why is that a human thing to do, so to speak? I would agree the answer is yes. Saw some people nodding. But would anyone like to give some thoughts about how come we're so good at justifying our own shortcomings when maybe not so tolerant of other people's quote unquote shortcomings?
A lot harder to see that in yourself than it is in someone else.
Okay. And why do you think that?
I
Go ahead,
think
Sherry.
sometimes we know and we just can't handle it, and sometimes it's subconscious. Sometimes we need to be, either persuaded. Sometimes you need to be made aware of your shortcomings, but sometimes we know. I know. I don't know all my issues, but I certainly know some of them. They're just hard. They're hard to deal with, and clearly he was not able to. And that was the one part of the movie that had me. It was a little bit mysterious to me, but you don't really know what's in someone else's head. To
Sure.
me, regardless of whether that kid was blood or not, I'd have been there for him, right? I'd have been the dad. And that it wasn't a choice that he could make at that time, probably because he couldn't see past his anger or whatever it was. I don't know what it was, but I think sometimes it's hard to, know when you have shortcomings and to be able to deal with them.
Fair enough. Toby, please.
I think a lot of it has to do with our ego and our self-preservation, that we need to protect ourselves, and it's one way that we can protect who we are.
Okay. Barbara, Lenny, whoever it's going to be there. I saw 2 hands up there.
I was just going to say that I think it's all what everyone said is really what I was thinking, that it's all within ourselves to do what we think is maybe right or best. And whatever we do, we think it's the right thing to do. And if that's what you think that's within yourself, you're going to do it no matter what. And you just think that's the right thing to do, period.
Okay, fair enough. Anybody else want to share their thoughts on why we justify what we do, or why human beings are very good at justifying what we do when we might see the same thing as a fault in someone else? Okay, so I will just say that I think one of the things that is very fascinating about the movie, and in this case, the character that is Sherry said, we don't really know if this boy was, blood or not blood, right? Is kind of this idea of, even in that, let's call it haze of things, like not knowing, for us as people watching, there are always ways, even individually, we can say to ourselves, yes, but, right? Other people should do X, Y, or Z. But you know, my situation is different because whatever it happens to be. And I think we are, in one way, as human beings, very good at looking at things in a general way, and then being, when it comes to us, a little more specific and forgiving, if that's the right way to put it, right? And you know, I think it is something that's very reasonable and very human for us to do. So, you know, I think totally understandable in the movie, and it points to a what do you want to call it, a facet of human nature that I think is totally real. Okay. All right. One or two other things that are for me, and then I'm going to ask your thoughts. Okay. One of the things that, in a kind of a humorous way, that happens throughout the movie is that the guys are also kind of dealing with their old boss in a way as he's trying to find them. He's obviously kind of like the comic foil with his sidekick, you know, and all those kind of good things that you would expect from a comedy film. So they're dealing with that, and they just are clearly also dealing with the fact that they have taken money that would belong to this mob leader. So one of the things they say in the movie is that they're going to quit their job and go become angels and do those kind of things. Okay. I'm just going to ask, has anyone here ever quit a job, like literally just said, I can't do this anymore, and quit a job? And then Lenny, for the win. Is that something you're willing to share and talk about, or no? You don't have to.
Well, there's been times, I was working for a company for a long time. And there were a number of people who were my bosses, and I didn't always agree with what they were thinking, what their thinking was, and how they went around doing business. And I was a little bit of a rebel when I was a little bit younger, and I didn't always do what they told me to do. I did it my way, and lots of times I was thinking, well, this day is going to be my last day, and I'm just going to walk off and say sayonara and just leave. Unfortunately, I didn't do that because obviously I had a family and I had to provide. But it was that point in time where I got to that umpteenth degree, that close, saying goodbye and just leave. But I didn't do that. You know, obviously I thought a little bit harder and said, you got to really be nuts just to leave, because you got to get another job.
Sure.
So, you know,
sure.
I came that close.
Got it. Excellent. Anybody else want to share if that is the case that they've had in their life, or even if they came close, or whatever it might be? You don't have to. I'm not going to make you do it. I will just ask one other note related to that, and then I want to get, if you have any thoughts or questions just in general, and then I have a few last things. The two main characters in this movie clearly are on a certain level doing something that is really wonderful by trying to make people's prayers come true. They are also doing it by using something, in this case, money, that doesn't actually belong to them, right? Whether it was, you know, money that was supposed to be derived from good purposes or not good purposes, it has a little bit of that Robin Hoodish feel to it, right? Take from the rich and give to the poor, or take from the powerful and give to those who are less powerful. So I'm going to ask you a question. What do you think of the, let's just say, let's use this term, of the morality, or what do you think of their choice to use money that really doesn't belong to them, but for good purposes? So if tomorrow you were driving down the road and like the bank truck fell over and outspilled $100,000, and you decided, I'm going to take this bag and use all the money for good. What do you think of that whole idea of using someone else's money, whatever you want to say, for that which is good?
say something.
Would you do it?
I would do it.
I got everything. I'm always.
Who said they would do it? Sorry.
I would do it.
Okay, Barbara would do it.
Yeah.
Jerry would do it. Janice would do it.
No, I wouldn't do it. I think it's
Okay,
still-
why would you not do it,
I
Janice?
think it's still stealing, no matter, whether or not you're trying to use it for good purposes. It's not your money. It's not your decision to decide what to do with it. So
Okay.
I don't agree with that.
Okay, and certainly you might say that if you were, at the beginning, they're talking about flying wherever to California and all the other places, but even for good, you would say no. I understand. Toby,
I probably wouldn't use it either, but go back to the old adage, does what you're doing justify the means? I mean, it's kind of like this balance of power of the justice system. I don't think I could do it. I think morally it would really bother me that I was using somebody else's funds to take care of situations. But, does the end justify the means? And it's something that's a personal decision for everyone.
yep. Sherry, what were you gonna say? I saw your hand raised before.
I mean, the other option would be the only other option would be to give the money back to the people that they extorted it from, right? That would have been a very short movie, but
Right.
but that's the only other option, right? Because now they're stuck with this movie. I mean, sorry, they're stuck with this money.
Money.
So you might as well do something good with it outside of, yes, they could have given it back, I suppose, but.
Right.
So I don't want to look like a bad person since everyone else is
Oh,
saying
no,
they would
Barbara, I
do it.
totally would use it. I would have totally done it. Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm with you.
if-
We could do it together.
Yeah, thank you, Shari.
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't do it if I saw somebody drop a like their wallet. I wouldn't take their wallet. But
Right.
if I'm driving in a Brinks truck and all this money flies around and other people are going to take it for their own purpose, I would take it to do good with it.
I think
you,
especially
Shari.
if you knew if it was going to go to nefarious purposes, then I
Right.
feel like you're saving it.
Right.
Like Code Blue.
There you
like-
go.
there you
Like
go.
Code Blue.
There's almost no choice.
Got it. Got it. By the way, everybody here should know, and I'm not here to ask if this is true or to judge anyone, no matter what you say. I just want to give you the Jewish law behind it. You may know that many people in church talk about something called tithing, right? The idea of giving 10% of their income, or if they win the lottery, or if they inherit something, or whatever it is that happens in their life. And everybody here should know that concept comes directly from the Torah. The idea that when we were an agricultural people, 1/10 of everything you grew, or 1/10 of your animals, the animals born that year, were supposed to be given, offered, sacrificed to God, right? So how is that translated into 2022? There is a variety of opinions, which will not surprise anybody. But there are some people who say you should give 10% of your gross income, whatever that number is. There are some people that say you should give 10% of some combination of your income, time, energy, go down the list of things. Okay. And there's some people that say you should give 10% of each of those things, right? 10% of your time, 10% of your money, whatever it may be. But that whole concept of, and by the way, 10% is a minimum, but you should never give away 100%. The great Maimonides said, you should never give away so much that you too need tzedakah yourself, that you don't win points for doing that. But the idea here is that there should be, each of us, whether it's financially or our energy or our time or our resources, connections, whatever it is we may have, that we should be giving at minimum 10% of that to helping those who are less fortunate than we are. Okay. So if you should, find that Brinks truck or win the lottery or whatever it might be, just something for us to keep in mind. I do want to ask one last thing on my end. They talk in the movie a lot about these ideas of the idea of these two guys are becoming like angels. Okay, like they're angel-like. So I do just want to let everybody know that in Judaism, there are actual angels. Okay, neither human nor God. When we say our prayer the Nikade, Kadosh, 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 and we go up on our toes. The reason we do that is according to the Bible, according to Jewish tradition, the angels said those 3 words. So we're kind of like getting a little bit higher, closer to them. Angels, unlike perhaps some other religions, never lived on earth. They never were people and that became angels. They're always kind of these beings somewhere between human and divine, if that's the right way to put it. Many of their names, even if you don't know it. There's like an angel Michael, Michael, angel Gabriel, right? And they do all kinds of amazing things. So I just want to share one little funny story, and you can decide if you like it or not. In the Middle Ages, when sports became a little more of a thing, and even into the, let's say 1700s, 1800s, sports became more of a thing. All along the way, before DraftKings and all the other things that were out there, people loved to gamble on sports. And the big sport at one time was horse racing. So what did you do? According to, there's many texts where you can see this. You would write a prayer on a piece of paper that would include angels' names written certain ways and, this number of times and whatever it is, and the horse that you wanted to win. You would go to the finish line. You would bury your paper underneath there because it was believed to have powers that the angels would cause your horse to win. How little has changed in the world of horse racing even to this day. But the idea of angels existing is something very true in Judaism. And now in a more serious way, there is this idea that every Shabbat, this is a beautiful, I think, thing, that every Shabbat, each of us, you can't hear them, but they're there according to Jewish tradition, has 4 angels, each of us, one on every side of us, right? Front, back, right, left. And the only thing they do during Shabbat is say our name, your name, my name, whoever, right? They're there to like protect us. To let God know, like, hey, Eric Goldberg is here, right? That kind of thing. And so there really is this belief in angels, but now I will ask the question that I'm going to ask. Can we, as human beings, really become angels? Can we do it? Or is an angel like a separate category or something that's different? What do you think? Can we do that which angels do? And anyone can answer. Feel free.
How do we clarify what an angel does?
Okay, so that's a good question. What would you say an angel does?
Giving. I think an angel gives. It gives of,
Okay.
and takes care of,
Protects?
I don't want to say people, but takes care of different options that may occur in his or her life. All right, and make good of it.
Okay.
An
Anybody
angel
else?
protects.
An angel protects. Okay. Yeah, Essie, please. Oh, you're muted. Hold on one sec. If you can just unmute yourself, that would be great.
I'm just thinking, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah. I'm just thinking that like during the movie, it was when they were going above and beyond. And when we think about people who we know even in our own world, who we can count on to go well beyond what might be expected of them. I
Okay.
would think that would be.
Very nice. Okay. Anybody else want to offer a thought about what an angel is, does, etc.? So look, I think it is fair to say that no human being, according to Jewish tradition, is an angel, but we all have the ability to be like angels, right? We have the ability, as you guys said, to protect, to go above and beyond, to be there for people, to guard, to look at the world and see what we can do to make it better, okay? And that is something that is clearly part of what we do. One of the words there's a couple words that are used for angels. One of them is shlichim in Hebrew, and that word means like a messenger, if that's the right way to put it. and obviously in Jewish tradition, a messenger from God. So there is this idea that we each have the ability to be that kind of person. We can take the messages, if we want to believe that the Torah was written by God or Jewish tradition is influenced and, touched with the words of God, that we have the ability to do angelic things, right? And that while we can never become an angel, nor will they ever make us an angel after it's all over, that we have the ability to do that. And to kind of circle back a little to where we were at the beginning, there really is this idea of throughout our lives, if we are growing or changing or having our eyes opened, it's to this idea that we can become very close to angelic, if that's the right word, in nature, right? We can do that. And that human beings have the ability to get very close, even if we can't get exactly there. So I'm going to just share one last text with you, and then we'll open it for questions or ideas or whatever it may be. Maimonides, again, one of the most famous rabbis of all time, wrote a book called the Mishnah Torah. Bold move, nothing like calling your book The Repetition of the Torah and putting in the introduction, you can read the Torah if you want, but you can also read this book because it gives you everything you need to know. Bold move. And he says, among the paths of repentance is for someone who wants to change or someone who wants to turn around, the word teshuva again here. First, you can constantly pray to God. Fine. You can perform tzedakah according to your potential. Whatever you can do to separate himself or herself far from what is sinful, right? If you are doing something like gambling, don't go to the casino. Separate yourself. To change his name as if to say, I am a different person and not the same one who has sinned. I'm going to come back to that in just a minute. To change his behavior in its entirety to the good and the path of righteousness. So the idea here would be to really look at, is what I'm doing good and righteous? And finally, I'm going to share something about changing your name, okay? According to Jewish tradition, there are 3 names that each of us gets, everybody gets. One is the name your parents gave you, okay? The example I always give is that when I walk into my parents' house or my parents walk into my house or I see my parents, I am not Rabbi Eric Goldberg to them, right? I'm just Eric, right? Their kid, okay? The second name that we get is the name that other people give to us. So just think for a minute, not just a nickname we might get, but literally the way in which people view us or what they say about us or what they call us. And that in many ways can be based on our actions or in a not so good way, based on a stereotype or based on something we did that we may not be so proud of. And then the last name we get is the name that we give to ourselves, the name we earn for ourselves. And there's this idea in Judaism that while we can't be angels, what we can attain is the idea of being Baal Shem Tov. Baal Shem Tov means the owner of a good name. And I think this movie is a great example of guys who are trying to do that. They were given names by their parents. There were names that other people kind of would have called them or ways in which people would have viewed them based on their past actions, right? And their names at the beginning of the movie that they earned, like those kind of names that other people would have called them. And in trying to grow and change and do the right thing by, bringing people's dreams to life or bringing people's wishes to life, what they were really trying to do is earn a good name. And according to Jewish tradition, I would say in the top 3 things you can do in life, like if you want to achieve whatever, is to, when it's all over, may not be till anyone's 120, but when it's all over, that people say that man, that woman, that person I know, they really had a great name. And when they say your name or they say whoever's name, it's not about how much money you have or what you materially might have. but the idea that you have a good name and people carry that, you know, want that name to be carried and what that name stood for to carry into the future. And so hopefully for Steve and Chuma, we don't know because the movie ends, obviously, but we hope that their ways continue and that they earn a good name. And I certainly hope for you guys in your lives, in my life, and Jay's life, and everybody's life, I know that we all seek to earn good names. And I know from the people here, from what you've done at Cheer Me and elsewhere, we're well on our way if we're not already there amongst many of us who are here. So I wanted to ask if there were any thoughts that you guys may have had that we may have missed, or questions you had, or ideas, or anything about the movie. And I'm happy to throw it open to the group. So Howard, yeah, please.
So I'm going to put maybe a religious type comment in here, and that, like your a reaction to, and that is, I was thinking about the whole concept of putting messages in the wall. And with the movie, now I know the movie was just, it was an entertaining movie, something we enjoyed watching, happy ending and all that. But I was wondering if there was this subtext of, was it that, oh, people are foolish, they're just sticking in random pieces of paper into the wall. It's kind of like making a wish and blowing out the birthday candles. Or was there something deeper, that God operates in strange ways, and he or she or it could operate by having these two guys carry out wishes, or making, through other means, people see things and accomplish, such as, I forgot what the name of the character was, but the one who in the end realized that Steve, right, was going to be a father to his son, and all that. And, although I guess that was in response to a piece of paper in the wall, but it was also a response, within himself. So,
there's a very famous statement that sometimes people know. I don't know if it's still in our prayer book. It was in the small gray prayer book that you may remember from a while back. There's this statement that says, pray as if everything depended on God, act as if everything depended on you. And I think that's a little of what this movie is also trying to say. Like, we can all go put our notes in the wall, and any of us who has ever been there, and I've been there, like many of you, multiple times, and we may put it in with a kind of a feeling of, if it could happen, that would be amazing, whatever we wrote and put in. And we also know, like, tacitly, that whether it's us or a doctor, or, something that's dealing with someone's job prospects or whatever it is, that we're going to need people to really be the people who do it. And so I think there is something kind of, it really highlights that, it's not double-edged sword, it's the wrong word, the two-pronged approach of, we believe both these things are true. Like, God can do it, but we need to do it too. Human beings need to do it too. Yeah, Bob. Oh, you're muted, Bob. Sorry.
When you were talking earlier about the Baal Shem Tov,
Yeah.
my brain headed to what I could recall from the high holiday services, when we talk about asking for forgiveness and tzedakah. And it seems like this idea that you were discussing earlier should be part of that, somewhere in that service, of how to improve your relationships in the broad sense, not just those couple things that we hear every time.
I would agree. And I think, especially when it comes to relationships, and to tie back to something we were talking about before, especially during, well, not just during the high holidays, but maybe especially during the high holidays, it is often very difficult for us to admit that maybe we haven't reached the level of that we're trying to reach in terms of who we want to be, and to take even the first step to being what we want to be, right? It's sometimes we've dug ourselves so far in. It could be, we've all heard this, people who haven't talked to whoever in their family for 30 years, right? And at this point, neither one wants to pick up the phone, or doesn't, even if it's just to say hello, and the other one says hello and they hang up, or whatever it is. So I think that it's very hard to do all the things we're talking about. And at the same time, it's, as you're saying, like a necessity for us to really be able to be who we can be, if that's the right way to put it. So, thank you. Yeah, Ellie, please.
This is a lot more mundane, but if anybody's looking for a good TV series to watch, one of the characters in this, it's a Cohen, I think his name is one of the gangsters. He stars in something called The Beauty Queen of Jerusalem. It's a TV series on Netflix. If you haven't watched it, it's kind of historical. It's not really that much, but it's if you're looking for something to watch, it is entertaining.
For sure.
And I occupied for.
I will just share, there's a couple others that might fall into that category, but one that people really love, it's a little bit older, but still in many ways holds true. It was once dubbed the Israeli Friends, if I'm going to use that as a quote. There's a show, I forget if it's on Netflix or Amazon Prime, called Srugim. It's like Srugim when it's written in English. And it's about 6 or 8, I forget how many, modern Orthodox Jews, so they look like anybody else. They're not your black hat wearing or tzitzit or any of that kind of stuff. Young people trying to figure out, like, they want to meet people to date, but they also are living in the modern world and they want to live a traditional life, but at the same time want to go like wherever they may want, like experience the world in a way that's not uber religious, if that's the right way to put it. So I would just say, like, when you see the speed dating part of that episode, it's really quite humorous because they're not really allowed to touch each other or express certain things to each other in a way. And it's really, so I would say Srugim, the one you mentioned, Ellie, is great. There's several others that people love that have nothing to do with like unorthodox or any of the other kind of like ones that are a little more on the edge of your seat, if that's the right way to put it. So for sure. And then just as a reminder, unless anybody else has something they would like to share, the next movie we're asking people to watch is for January 26th. So a little over a month. It's called Abe. It's the story, or it's a movie, so it's fiction, of a young boy who loves to bake and cook and loves the cultures that he's a part of, who has 2 amazingly wonderful parents who are not particularly religiously affiliated, but love the cultures from which they come. One is Palestinian, one is Israeli. They live in New York, but they also have the grandparents involved. And as Abe grows up and becomes a 12-year-old, now we have the Israeli grandparents who would like for their child to become their grandson to become bar mitzvah, and the Palestinian Muslim grandparents who would like for their grandson to do the things of Muslim traditions. And you have the parents who don't really care about doing any of it. And how do you make sense of a world in which, first of all, how do you identify, right? In terms of if you're Abe. And secondly, what do you do when your family, not everybody in the family may want to do things the same way and may have strong feelings about it and subtly or not so subtly let people know. So we'll see how, we'll watch that movie, and I've seen it obviously, and you guys will give me your thoughts on that as well and give each other our thoughts on that, because it's something that's in 2022, 2023, when we talk about it, very much at the forefront today of how do we kind of identify culturally, how do we identify religiously, right? Even the name Abe, as I said to those who were here at the beginning, it wasn't on our recording, I don't believe. His real name, depending on who you ask, he likes to be called Abe. His Israeli family loves to call him Avraham, and his Palestinian Muslim family loves to call him Ibrahim, all of which are the same name. So we'll see how that goes. You'll see how.
Is that another Netflix, Eric?
I think it's Amazon Prime. It's one or the other. I'll send you all the information. But
Okay.
either one of those, for sure. Any other last thoughts before we head on our way for the evening? I hear the rain, I hear the wind. It's going to be a nice night to stay in.
Right.
Well, enjoy, everyone. I'm going to stop recording here for a moment.